Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrived by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 217, today I'm joined by Reverend Charles Coverdale, pastor of the First Baptist Church of Riverhead, and a central voice in faith, civic leadership, and community building on the East End for more than 4 decades. Pastor Coverdale is preparing to retire at the end of December, marking the close of an extraordinary chapter of service. Prior to moving into my questions, Pastor Coverdale opened with a powerful, deeply personal introduction that traced the experiences that shaped him from his family's roots and early childhood to the moments that formed his worldview, his faith, and ultimately his calling. In our conversation, we talk about his upbringing, his years as an educator, his time at Harvard Business School, and what first brought him to the First Baptist Church back in 1982. We also explore his work beyond the pulpit, founding community organizations, serving as chaplain with the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, and becoming a consistent advocate for human rights, civil rights, and interfaith cooperation. We also discuss a dream nearly 4 decades in the making, the long-planned community center and affordable housing project. Under Pastor Coverdale's leadership, the Family Community Life Center vision has finally moved towards reality, with approved plans for a community hub that includes a 10,000 square foot center, affordable housing, and recreational space. Across more than 40 years in Riverhead, Pastor Coverdale has played many roles: pastor, teacher, organizer, bridge builder. In this episode, he reflects on that journey, the moments that shaped him, the community he has nurtured, and his hopes for the future of his congregation and the wider East End. So I hope you enjoy episode 217 with Pastor Charles Coverdale. This episode was recorded October 22nd, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really an honor to have you on today.
Well, thank you.
And so to start off in the beginning, if you could give us a little introduction about yourself.
Okay. I guess the best way to start with the introduction is that I was born in 1943, June 2nd, in Yonkers, New York. And after a week there, because both of my parents were from Yonkers, they moved to the Bronx. So all my life, basically, I was raised in the Bronx, New York. I went to, of course, the elementary schools, junior high school, and the high schools in the Bronx. I had an interesting trek, particularly when I got to junior high school, because that was so different than an elementary school setting. And I had an opportunity to join what they call the safety control and also be part of like the student government. I rose up in the ranks of the safety patrol to run for school-wide elections, become what they call commissioner of the safety control. And that was my first introduction to running for anything in my life. And it was very political for a young kid, but I had to make my signs and do all the other things and talk to kids and tell them what I would do. And I let people know of why I believe I should be the commissioner of the safety control with all the other monitors under me. And I won that election. Very close, but I won it. I don't win elections by much. That's never been my history. Because I'm always trying something new, and therefore I'm learning why I'm doing it, and the other people that generally I run against are much more experienced than I am in sort of political social world.
Mm-hmm.
When I went to high school, I had a brother who was treasurer of Morris High School in the Bronx, and he was telling me about getting involved in school, and I ran track, and I joined the student government. And by him challenging me. He said, when I became a senior, I was treasurer of the high school. I expect that when you become senior, you'll be probably the first African American to be president of the high school. I'm not always clear how correct he was about the first, though I never seen anyone there when I was running or going to school. But I was determined to take the challenge. And so in my early years, I was sophomore representative. I became a treasurer. I ran, that's the first election for the bigger spots in the school's student government. And then I had a chance to fulfill his challenge and run for president of Morris High School. And that was quite an experience. And that was the one, I guess, got me more excited in political issues and all. It was a school where you had about a third white, third black, and a third Hispanic. And all the tickets, which you hope would try to be mixed in some ways. And certainly I ran on a mixed ticket. And I end up winning that election by, again, I would say a close vote. I never won an election by hundreds of votes. It was always within less than 100 because I was always running against the grain and against those. For example, the gentleman I ran against in high school, he had been there since the 9th grade. I came to the high school in the 10th grade. So he had a whole year of students backing him up that I had never met, and I had to meet when I arrived and had friendships already made. So I was going against the current, but I won. And that was a really great opportunity for me because like most city high schools, you run the student government in some ways, but Morris High School, the student government president as well as the treasurer had really a lot of power for high school students. We set the budgets for every club in the school, and we set most of the programs dealing with the students in the school, only with the faculty advisor. So I'm now maturing a little bit, as one might say, being in high school and doing those kinds of things. And after leaving Morris High School, I went to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. It was a historical black college, but it was a male college, one of two male colleges left in the United States. Morehouse, the famous one, and Lincoln University, the other famous one, were the only two. When I graduated, it was about maybe 5, 6 girls in who had entered school where either their fathers were a faculty member there or they were nieces to somebody. But we really didn't have a female class, just all male class mostly when I graduated. So after that, I went to work for Johnson & Johnson, Route 1. And one of the interesting things about that, I was the first black professional industrial engineer in what they call the adhesive mill. That's where they make the product named Band-Aids. Mm. And at that time, Micron mouthwash, which they make no longer. They don't make it no longer because they found out people were drinking it on the production line. It had alcohol. But anyway, I was there. That was a real different experience coming from a basically historical black college to one of the premier Johnson & Johnson located in New Brunswick, which is the headquarters, and being one of the only blacks there. They had a guy in charge of maintenance department, but he wasn't really with me. And that experience from going from a majority black college, now I'm in an all-white setting. And often during those days, that was in the 60s, I ate by myself. Most people didn't socialize with me, even though they might talk to me on the job. When it was time for lunch, everybody had their cliques, and I kind of had to eat by myself, which was a lonely experience, and I didn't treasure it very much. But I learned how to integrate into the system, not as completely as I would have liked to, but I've learned what it meant to be the only. And after coming from a college, I told you, majority black university, and mixed school in New York, that was a different kind of field I had to operate in, but I learned how to operate in it. And I just wasn't very happy there. So quickly I applied to Mobil Oil Corporation, New York City, on 42nd Street. And that brought me back to the kind of New York City environment I knew, a mixed environment, a mixed company, and back to I might say, an environment where I was more at ease and I knew something about. It was at Mobil Oil Corporation where I began to make my mark in the business field, and I applied to business school thinking that I was going to stay in the business field, and I applied to Columbia University. And while I was interviewing for Columbia University Business School, the gentleman who interviewed me said, "You ought to interview for Harvard Business School." And I said, "Why?" My family lives here. No, I'm a Bronx resident. I know the city. I got living in Brooklyn now. He said, "The way I see you operate and things you do, you probably be really fitted more for the exceptional class than the regular textbook class that Columbia runs." And I didn't know what that meant, so I went and visited Harvard, and I found out they did things by case study, and that was really different from a textbook. And each person was in a particular class, from A, probably almost in the middle of the alphabet someplace, and I was in section G, and I was one of 5 blacks in that class of 75. And so my Harvard Business School was a tremendous experience for me in my life. It changed my whole setting, who I was around, top students from across the country, learning things that I never learned before, because my background was not really studying business as a lot of them came. They were business students. Mine was biology and chemistry in college. So I just did business afterwards for J&J and Johnson & Johnson. So this was now really learning business and how it operates in the big corporations and things behind the scenes. So I graduated in 1971 from the Harvard Business School. And when I was graduating, 2 things happened in my life. The summer before, 1970, I worked in Chicago for Jewel Foods Company. And there I ran back into my daughter's godfather, Dr. Calvin Morris, who was the assistant to Jesse Jackson. And I was working for Jewel Foods, and I was hired by his chairman of the board who visited Harvard and asked me where I applied to come do some job there. And I helped them understand how supermarkets and chain stores work during a time when they were trying to get the minorities in Chicago to learn more about the inner city operation of how to handle themselves in supermarkets. And the supermarkets hired me to work with the first inventory control system. That's when you check out of a grocery store, they send that thing to the clicker. It affects the inventory in the back of the store, so they know how much is left. And the change, and this is where I think I would change direction here, is that after that, I went back to the business school to work. A teacher, every student had to take business policy in the business school their second year. And in my business policy class, my teacher liked how I put together business, social, and economic things together. And he was taken with me, for most students didn't know how to do that. And next thing I knew, he came up to me and said, "I see you work for Jesse Jackson as well as Jewel Food Company when you were in Chicago." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I nominated you to teach preachers, particularly ministers, priests, and rabbis, and some Muslims at the Harvard Divinity School. And you might want to consider it." and they give a stipend, though they don't pay, but you already have, I understand, accepted a full-time teacher's job at Simmons College for women in Boston. I said, yes. He said, that might be a good adjunct for you. So I went over there and I accepted it. The next thing I knew, they accepted my papers for being accepted into the Harvard Divinity School. I never quite figured out how, but I got into it, and then I applied for Rockefeller Foundation Scholarship, which helped pay the way. And I did that and taught college in an all-women's school. After teaching there for about 3 or 4 years, I went to Bentley College. It was very interesting because Bentley College was one of the good business schools in the outskirts of Boston. And it was a student of mine at Simmons that I taught who ended up marrying the president of Bentley College. And he was talking to her at dinner one time about looking for a professor of business. And she said, you should contact Charles Coverdale at Simmons College. He was my professor. He's really outstanding. So it was from a student who recommended me to her husband, who was president of the university, that called me up, and I interviewed there, and then I taught at Bentley College for several years while I continued working in the field of business and education. So while I was at Divinity School and teaching, there was a church that needed help in Providence, Rhode Island. And it was at that time Pond Street Baptist Church. Some people knew it as Second Free Will Baptist Church historically in the Free Will movement. And they were dying, and there's about maybe 20 members in the church, historic though. And they asked me would I come down and help get them back together. And the people at the Divinity School felt that'd be a good thing for you to get some experience helping take your unique business background and help turn around a church. And so I went to Providence, commuted from Boston down to Providence every week, and turned the church around, getting them set up. And at the end, they asked me, will you come and be our pastor, which I never thought about in my life, becoming a pastor of a church. And they said, you're in the theology school, you're learning theology, you're in the track, you're the perfect person, business. So I really thought about it and prayed on it. And that's the first time I think I asked God, was he going to change my direction from business to theology? And I got the answer, and then went home and told my wife that I was going to assume the pastor's job in Providence. And of course, she cried again because all her time working helped me through business school. They were all looking for me becoming a professional in business, making a good job and making some great money. And that was not the road that God sent me down. He sent me down the pastoral road. It was bad enough I was teaching, they said, because that wasn't a big time business job. But I went there and I stayed there 9 years, helping them getting on their feet. The church grew, prospered and stuff. And I got called down to Long Island. There was someone in the Boston area who knew I was ordained in a church there, and told a relative in Long Island, in Riverhead, about me. And they invited me down for Men's Day. And I'd never been to this part of Long Island called Riverhead. My area of expertise was the Bronx, and I had a brother that worked for a while in Glen Cove, and I thought Glen Cove was almost the end of the island. Wasn't I surprised? And I took the ferry in, and I went through and I saw cabbage, and I saw duck farms, and I saw potatoes, and there was no wine country at that time. And I came through there and smelled the food. They turned over the cabbage at the end of the season. I said, God, where are you sending me? And so I finally ended up in Riverhead. And I did their service there for a special Men's Day service. And as I left and went back to my church in Providence, they called and contacted me, wanting me to consider coming down and being a candidate for their church. and that was a surprise. I didn't know much about Riverhead sort of being more country-like. I've always been in cities, whether it was Boston, Cambridge, Providence. All city life has been my experience. But God led me there, and I was working there, and I said, I don't think this is a good fit, I told the officers. I said, my background made me work in urban areas, the urban plight and all, and you're more a country church. And they said, yeah, we never had a minister from the north. All our ministers have come from the south. I said, see, I'm talking about that's not maybe a good fit for me. So I went back to my home church, never accepting a call there. And I said, God, going back on the ferry across the Sound, if I have done something inappropriately, if I have turned down where you want me to go and be, let me know by sending me back, and I will not question you, and I'll go right away. I don't know why I made that statement, except that I was a little nervous about not accepting a challenge that maybe God was putting me in, because it was unfamiliar territory for me in terms of my historical background. Well, when saying that, a year later, they called me up and said, we really want you to come and be our pastor. And I came down and I preached there again. And when I was getting ready to leave, they said, please really consider coming. We really want you to be our pastor. And then going back across to Providence on the ferry again to New London, I thought about what I said to God. And when I got back into Providence, I went to my home church that Sunday. And there's an expression in the Bible called the clarion call. And I stood in front of the church without a second thought and said, I have heard the clarion call that God wants me down in Riverhead, New York. And I set a date for leaving. And my brother's working with me there at the church, so he took over until they found the pastor. And I left. That begins in 1982. A pause for a second. I arrived in August at First Baptist Church of Riverhead. I've been talking straight, and Chris hasn't stopped me, so I hope that I'm covering what he would like me to share with the audience. But now in 1982 in August, I become the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Riverhead. Little did I know really what God had in store for me. Cultural shock. The way I preached and taught was so different from the ministers they had from the South. Talking as a professor, not trying to sound much like one, but I'm sure I came over to them like one. From the Harvard Divinity School, the Harvard Business School, and working in the Boston area, now a preacher out in Riverhead, which was a lot of members of our church worked on farms, and not many was at Stony Brook or any of those places yet out here on the island. They were beginning to open up. So that was really a different path for me to travel. But I kept praying for God to show me why He wanted me to be in Riverhead. And after my first year of surveying the people, the community, working with different organizations in the town, particularly some in Suffolk County, God struck me with the idea and the purpose for me being in Riverhead. And I didn't rush with what He was telling me to do. That's sort of how preachers talk, that God talked to them in a certain way, not only through the Spirit, but through their hearts and through their minds. But I knew now my purpose. And my purpose was that the people in the church, I felt, was moving slowly, because that was their southern way. They all came from the South mainly. They were farmers and all. But rapidly in 82, if you thought about the movement in the 60s and the 70s, I thought the church was really moving at a pace that was not what I believe was fitting for their own community as well as for the youth that was starting to graduate and go to school, and has been sort of in these sort of farm communities that know about how to operate in the bigger schools. Some was getting accepted to Princeton. Then, that was a whole different world for them, but I've been out of the world. They were going to different schools outside of Riverhead, outside of New York, Suffolk County. And so I knew what that was like by going to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. And we started reorienting our church life to helping the young students know where to go, how to go. Some had already chosen, so I had nothing to do with that. They just got selected from the school to go to Princeton or something, but at least I was aware of it and helped others. Working with adults to learn things I thought was important, looking at the church board and changing them into ministries, not church boards, so they have a different psychological outlook for doing ministry in the community, not just being in a well-built church, just to marry their children and bury their dead. And I opened up and said, this is what God has shown me. And I spoke to the church that we have a responsibility by being blessed by God to do more in our community and surrounding areas than we have done historically all these years. And I need some of you to kind of be willing to follow me and give me the test. Even though you're not used to city ministers, and you told me all the jokes, you always thought city ministers are city slickers. And maybe that's why you always had country ministers. But to walk with me down a path that I don't know very well what God's going to do with us traveling down there. But let's go on an adventure and see what God's really showing us. And as we walk together, I began to start a scholarship fund that raised $50,000 and that we used to use the interest off to help young people go to college. And they thought I was crazy trying to tell them we are going to raise $50,000. And so, but we did so successfully. I'm starting now to earn some chips from the membership that maybe I'm not a city slicker, not as bad as they might have thought, even though a lot thought that the preacher's skills were okay and all. And I kept growing the church that way. We took kids to Africa later on in history. They'd never been to Africa. And we had a couple of kids from Brooklyn join our journey. And the whole church worked with these kids, getting them ready. And we took them to Africa through about 4 or 5 countries. They'd never been to Africa. They didn't know what Africa was like. And we studied. Then we took them there and brought them back. And they were surprised at the cities that they went in Africa, different places, because they thought it was all jungle from the movies and all. So we kept trying to open that whole cultural thing open and looking around for what God wanted us to do in the river and surrounding areas. I thought about and eventually hired a board member from Rhode Island, who I met, and hired him for a consultant to come to Riverhead and to interview the library, the Arts Council, every type of community organization in Riverhead, talk to different churches, and then give us a report. And from that report, I told the church, let's see what we can do to fulfill the needs of what people said that this community needed. And one of the things they said they needed badly was housing. Another thing was they don't have a community center, a boys club, a YMCA, no place for young people to go. Mm-hmm. Young people don't know how to swim, yet they're living on Long Island surrounded by water. And they talked about different ways of culturally moving and mixing the community so it become a more integrated place to live. And so I've talked to the church and I said, I want to recommend to you that we do things or do something we never did before. I believe this community really needs a community center. And would you go with me down that road to see if we can build it? And we wanted to call the community center, since it's for the community, not the First Baptist Community Center. We wanted a title. And somebody said, we can call it the Charles Coverdale Community Center. I said, we haven't even started yet. No, I don't want it named after me. I want it named for the purpose of why we're doing it. And so we decided on the name. I recommend the Family Community Life Center. Basically, for families we saw broken and families that needed help and assistance. Life, that in this center we're going to breathe life into people, into children and adults, because it's made for all ages, seniors. It's going to be for the entire community, not based on our church. And it'll be a center for all these things to operate in. Well, everybody thought I was crazy. I probably went through 4 supervisors of Riverhead Town Board who would not okay my vision to build a center on our land. So I brought more land. I got 6 more acres added. So we had 12.25 acres now land, and we paid for it. And then I went back to town and said, I'm not asking you to give us land. We already bought the land. We own the land. But we cannot build it because it's a mixed-use venue. And our land's all built for church and church use. And they didn't see the community center being church use. And then from there, we also said we wanted to add a housing component because Riverhead had a lack of housing. And all the kids that went to school and got educated left the Riverhead area, and the doctors and nurses were coming from New York to work here, and there's no housing stock. So we added the housing component. That meant it really was a mixed-use venue. And we just couldn't get it passed for them to see the vision. I went to New York State government agencies in Albany, and I convinced the various groups up there that they should invest in what we're doing in Riverhead. They agreed to invest, but when I got back to Riverhead, I could never get the town board to vote to approve it. And the state said, we cannot give you money, even though they had told me how much they were going to give me, if the town does not vote to approve it. Because the state doesn't put money into areas in which the local people do not approve. I worked on this project for 40 years. It just got passed 2 months ago. The Riverhead Town Board. If one was to listen to the meeting, people talked about how they always heard about the center. One lady on town board, as a legislator, said she was a kid on a school bus riding by and said, I wish they would build that center. And we had no Y. We had the Y come in and talk to us, but evidently they didn't settle on building on our land, which they said they were interested in, and we had no objection to it. We wanted Riverhead to have a center open for people of all ages and cultures and races. That was our initiative. One supervisor told me, who has passed now, I will never let a black man build something that has a possibility of hiring more people than Town Hall has. I never thought about how many people Town Hall had. That was not on my agenda. It was on his agenda because he's a politician. That's not my agenda. The second one told me, I wouldn't help you build it because that will give you a basis to run against me for a town board supervisor. I never expressed interest in being in politics. All I wanted to do was build something and have our church sponsor and build something for the betterment of God's kingdom that would serve all people in the area, and that this what we would build that the area had a need for and presently does not have. And that was the issue that I fought for years. I was on the Riverhead Town Clergy Association as president. They looked at me like I was crazy, said, no, churches can't build. That's Long Island stuff. I was on Suffolk County Human Rights Commission. They said, well, that's the town. Riverhead has to vote on that. Nobody would vote. So the problem was that how do you keep a church interested that already paid for the land, who agreed with the theological premise and the philosophy of doing more outside the church for the community, not just inside for the church? How do you keep their interest? How do they say whether or not, if it took you, Reverend Coverdale, and 37 years ago you presented that, and now we're going into the 38th, 9th, this can't be the vision God gave you. Something don't seem right. And then you have like a minor uproar on a low level of whispers that the pastor was really off. God didn't give him the vision. And at the same time, I'm preaching, hold on. Help is on the way. God did say stop. And I started using illustrations in the Bible of Egyptians holding the Hebrews in captivity for 40 years before they left and got their homeland. I talked about different things that occurred in biblical writ where it took a long time, a generation, for God to make that spoken vision he gave to the prophets true. And I just kept preaching and holding on faith that I asked God again to show me. I understood their frustration, their aggravation, their sort of, is this true? Because even myself, as the pastor and the visionary, I kept saying, God, did I get it right? Am I going the right way? And he kept saying, just hold on. The victory will be yours. And then this year, they passed it. And everybody's saying, for 40 years, he fought for this vision for the town and stuff, raised money, paid for the land it's going to be built on, paid for all the consultants that came and told him about housing and recreation, did all that through the church. And now we have a chance to actually build it. And our developers are getting the new designs ready now and getting things set. And we have received $1.5 million from the federal government and another $1 million, a quarter, I think, or half from the state government. And funds are starting to come in different ways. We still have a lot of money to raise for a project this big. Housing development starting to happen. I developed 3 various nonprofits: a housing corporation, Family Community Life Center, an Open Arms nonprofit for feeding the poor. We have one of the largest feeding programs out here from the church. We kept the focus on spiritual things, but with an outward design and look forward for the community's benefit. And that's what we had to finally get. They call it a community benefit district that was voted upon, and now we can build our project. It was arduous. I think for a church, I've seen people die holding on to the vision, new people coming in, struggling with people that was born there to church who now had children. Remember, this is a 40-year to get it done. And getting married, now their kids are little running around. It was definitely a generational passing and new ones growing up and people coming and joining from different places. And I being blessed because I ended up with a staff of 4 pastors. And they kept saying, there's only one pastor in the church. I said, that's not true. I said, a pastor, and I told them the definition of what they do. And I said, these 3 others one was a pastor. I hired him as a pastor. The second one I hired was a pastor before in a church of their own. And the other one came to our church, Reverend Cynthia Ligon, who's already been voted in since I'm retiring this December as the new pastor of the First Baptist Church. And her family grew up in the church, and she grew up in that church. And she'll be the first woman pastor of that church, an historical event. And we agreed that you would come aboard January 1st, but you'll be installed in February during Black History Month, since it's a historical event. And we thought that'd be a good emphasis that she thought, and I agreed with, for her to come on board. So I did those things as best I can describe to you, as God led me down some strange paths, various directions, some crossover streets, I would call it. And yet, now I sit here, I came around 38 years old, and I'm sitting here talking to you, and I'm 82 years old, going on 83. 43 years, I would never have thought that I would be the pastor of First Baptist Church that long. 43 years, my hopes and aspirations have shaken the foundation of my faith, but restored my belief and kept me moving forward down the direction in which God was sending me. Yes, shaky sometimes. No need to make it out it was all perfect. Wondering sometimes whether the vision I received from God was what I was supposed to be doing. But every time I got a little nervous, a little shaky, God showed me that I was on the right path. Just hold out. Help is on the way. And so we started shouting a long time before the town board voted. Victory is ours. We knew we were doing that which God wanted us to do. Why else would we be able to get a farmer who owned land near our land to sit down with me and negotiate a price? And then I asked him to hold the mortgage till we paid off. And we paid off in 6 years. And less than that, I think. And he was giving us 12. Paid off the church, put solar on the church, all these little inventions, things that we did as we went along the trek. Because I said, just because you're walking towards a mark doesn't mean you don't look on each side and you don't take care of people. We feed loads of people from the First Baptist Church 3 to 4 days a week. We give out all kinds of things that people give us to help us, mattresses from companies or beddings or wherever it is. We have Muslims group up the island, and their women knit blankets for us, and we pass them out through our church to sick and shut in, and to the elderly that needs blankets. We never stopped ministering. And just because we were going towards building this vision didn't mean we didn't stop and do other visions. For 40 years, we held the Martin Luther King breakfast in Suffolk County. And when I came here, they didn't even celebrate Martin Luther King. It wasn't even a federal holiday. And I started the breakfast with a lady that has passed on now, Gwendolyn Branch, myself, and a couple of others. And we worked that, and last year was the 40th year of that breakfast. This year, with Reverend Lincoln taking over, would be the 41st. How would I ever know that God would set me up in Riverhead to spread out to Suffolk County, the whole Suffolk County event, not a Riverhead event, celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday before it was a national holiday. Started it out this way and took it further west, and ended up with sometimes 800 people at the breakfast, 500-600 people all the time, and have this breakfast that universities would come to and advertise in the journal, businesses would come and advertise and support, different people from different churches would support, and became something way beyond what I could ever envision happening. So it's not just that you have one main vision down the road you're working on. It's all the other little visions that you work on as you move towards that which God has put further out of your reach. Can I say this to you who are listening? One of the things I learned about ministering that I was not totally aware of. Maybe a little textbook awareness, a book you might read that someone wrote, an autobiography, but a human experience from my heart and soul. That while you are working for distant things to occur that God has shown you, He always shows you things right next to you as you move down that road that need to be done. You have to invest and look at the future, but you must operate at the present needs of people. When people came to Long Island and needed medicine to register school, we paid for all the inoculations of students, working with another group up the island. One gentleman was a musician, came and helped us and through his support there. And I thought about it, I would never think I'm buying medicines, inoculations that they're fighting over during this administration, and make sure all the kids that came from various Hispanic nations that were working out here were inoculated so they could go to the public school in Riverhead. I would have never thought about doing that. I would never thought that on my way to the final vision that I would somehow convince Stony Brook's medical school urology department to set up in our church centers of doctors and offices so men would get tested for cancer, so that they would know that their health should not go unsurveyed and unassisted by them, and put on radio broadcasts things about how you treat families and violence to women and men. All these things, all these years while moving to trying to build a community center, meant that I had to operate in the presence of what God was putting around me and direct people there. When I say operate, let me be clear. The pastor only supports, preaches, teaches, demonstrates, and shows people what God is showing him. People who come to church must grab a hold of not only the vision of the church, but their own visions, their own way in which they want to operate throughout the church. So I never forget that I could have done nothing while all the souls that have passed by me and worked with me and have gone to glory, I pray, but gave me a lending hand, support, assistance, and help on that trek towards where I am today. So in December, when I stepped down, I helped train and started with a young woman who never went to college. But I showed her when she was helping me out as a volunteer, no, she should go to college. Graduated from St. Joseph, Valedictorian. Continued on to Brunswick School of Theology. Graduated near the top of the class. Stayed and worked with me for over 25 years. And now is going to assume the pastorate of the First Baptist Church. No one could have told me that that would be the history of my trek. Coming from the new London ferry to Orient Point, driving through farmlands, smelling the cabbage that was turned over, seeing potatoes growing, seeing the ducks in my neighborhood and the duck plant, that I would be this day in wine country, that I would be doing the things and accomplishing the things with the church and community that I worked with, being supported through all the various executives through Suffolk County, working through 5 or so supervisors that passed through Riverhead, and finally getting a vote of 100% that we now could go on and build this project. We just don't know. And what I'm saying to you is, neither do you. But can I give you some now pastoral advice? When God comes to us, we are not the products he wants us to be. He has a history, and if you don't believe me, read the Bible, of taking unfinished people, because God wants to finish us off and bring us into the fullness of ourselves. He takes us, who are not exceptional, and works with us to make us as exceptional as he can on this earth possible. He takes us from our darkness and the shadows that we live our lives in. And somehow through him, he moves us into the marvelous light. What we think or who we think is better, we're not. Because we don't know what God has in store for us. We only know for a moment in time where we stand and what we see and what we learn about ourselves. Take my word as best as you can. God's not through with you yet, and God's not through with me. December 31st, I stepped down from the pastorship of First Baptist, but I'm chairman of the board of the Family Community Life Center. And I'll use those days to raise money and to build those housing and community centers for this community. I once told God, use me until you use me up. I really must not have known what I was saying at the time, but I can tell you now, he sure is using me until he used me up. I'm still alive. I'm healthy. I went to operations for cancer, for heart, quadruple heart bypass. The only thing on me today that's suffering a little bit is my low vision. I'm healthy as an ox. I still love people and reach out. And God still gives me visions of things I could do that need somebody to do, even if I'm 82. One of the preachers said, now you really are in a position to pass the better to the senior citizens of our community. And so through the Family Life Center, we have a seniors program. I'm there almost all the time. They're down there dancing with them, eating with them, sharing lunch with them, talking with them. And the makeup is people from all different places surrounding Riverhead. Not necessarily all from Riverhead, but surrounding Riverhead. And guess what? The supervisor told me once if I build a housing, that I'll bring people from the Bronx. And I thought he was out of his mind. But working with the Senior Citizen Center at the church through the Family Community Life Center, I found 4 people who graduated from the high school I graduated from in the Bronx. That supervisor might have been a prophet, but he didn't realize I didn't have to bring them out. They already lived, because they're older than me, right here in the Riverhead area. And we all graduated from the high school in the Bronx, and had no idea 43 years later I would find them amongst the people I'm ministering to out here in Riverhead. I don't know if he has any questions, because he has turned me loose in this conversation. And I have tried to handle it as best as I could. But certainly, I want to make sure if he has any questions, such as his broadcast, and he invited me, that he has a chance to ask me.
No, definitely. That was good going through all of that. But I wanted to touch back on a few things that you touched on throughout that. If we could go back a bit to you growing up in the Bronx, could you talk a little bit about your parents and what they did for a living?
My father worked for Otis Elevator Company as what they call a stator winder. For those you don't know what that is, he took wire and he circled around spools to make motors. My mother was a Girl Scout leader and a home mom. It was 5 of us. She made a decision to stay home because where we lived was not a great neighborhood. I didn't know until President Jimmy Carter came to the Bronx that I lived in a slum, though I really didn't know it wasn't the greatest neighborhood in the world. I grew up around drug addicts. I was almost stabbed in junior high school in the back staircase. I saw people around us with guns. I was shot at when I went to Fordham Road on a Boy Scout venture at the Botanical Gardens, my brother and I. Sometimes when I look back over my life, I do wonder why I try not always to talk about the Bronx very much, except when people ask me where I'm really from and like ask me to say more about it. If it was not for my mother and father and the church, one of the questions they asked me, I've been in church all my life. I grew up a Presbyterian in the Bronx because my father wanted us in the church. And his father was a minister in the Methodist church, but there was no Methodist church around us. So the nearest thing he could find was the Catholic church across the street from the building we live in, and 1 block down that street was a Presbyterian church. And he put us all in that church when we grew up there. Influences from parents was that my parents didn't just tell us to go to church. They made sure we got to church. We were there when they were there. They worked in the church. The woman I married came from my home church that I grew up in. She was a Girl Scout there and a member of that church. Her father, my father, worked as trustees on the board of that church. Little did they know that she would help me run for president of Morris High School, making artwork, that she would become my fiance and my wife and the mother of my 2 children. We always moved through and around the church. Influences? My pastor, Elder G. Hawkins, became the first black moderator of the USA Presbyterian Church. They were groundbreakers, and we grew up around them. And we were always challenged, and I was challenged to live a life that was more than my circumstances in which I was found in. My mother and father encouraged that. They kept us in Boy Scouts. And we got laughed at when we wore our uniforms during Scout Week because hardly nobody in our neighborhood wore them. But guess what? By wearing it, we built a whole troop of people seeing that we had the nerve to wear and became Boy Scouts. And we ended up building up Scout Troop 93. That was at that time located a little bit from Presbyterian Church they called Victory Baptist Church. And grew a whole group of not only Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts, but went on to create one of the greatest Explorer Scout troop, one of the major, if not the only black ones in New York during that time. You never grow by yourself. Thank you for asking me that question again. Because if it wasn't for my mother and father, who I still talk to because their pictures sit on the mantelpiece in my house, and I have a tendency to sit in the chair across from them. And I thank them almost every day for the skills, the encouragement, the love that they gave us, as well as other people in the community who saw my mother as their mother, the Girl Scout leader. My father, who could not get off for our graduation without losing pay, but attended every one of his children's graduation. Didn't matter if they paid or not, from high school, and most time from junior high school also. I have a song that you're going to sing Sunday. I got it from the famous singer Joe Crocker from England. He won a Grammy Award, and he sang that. The song is, I'm so glad that I'm standing here today. He was singing about his fight with drugs, overcoming difficulties, being poor, down and out, suffering. When I first heard the song, I was thankful that I never did drugs in a city that was full of drugs, in my community where there was nothing but drugs. But all the rest was my story. And I brought it to church because it's not a church song to them, but I want them to sing it because I am so glad that this coming Sunday I'll be standing here today.
Yes. And I wanted to ask about just growing up in that environment. You mentioned your parents and the church, but was there a point growing up in that environment where you felt like you ever veered away from the church at all, or you were always committed through middle school, high school?
I was always in the church till I graduated from high school. And I went to college, and I joined the choir in the church on campus and on the university choir. So I was still attached to the church on Sunday because I sang every Sunday in church, as well as we sang through the United States at different times. I cannot honestly think of a time that was not associated with a church.
Mm-hmm.
Not working as fully when I went to Harvard Business School. That was in Cambridge. I found the church was a Presbyterian church, but it was a Baptist church. And that's where I kind of switched and became more Baptist than Presbyterian because I wasn't in New York anymore.
Okay.
And from then on, I was working and involved in church. Went to school, theology school, stayed in church, all the way up to the present day. So I really can't think of a time the church didn't play an important part of my life. But more than that, the ministers in the various churches. One in the city, I said, becoming the first African-American moderator of the Presbyterian Church USA. When I got to Cambridge, the pastor of the church I joined, I found out later he became my professor at the Harvard Divinity School. So he was a teaching there. He was a graduate of Harvard Divinity School, and he came back from Baltimore, I think Trinity Baptist Church in Baltimore, up to Harvard, and went back to the church he worked with when he was a student at Harvard, became pastor again. So the church played a tremendous part of my history. I want to say something that's attached to it. You're not going to ask me, it just came to mind. When I was in business, before I went and really became a pastor in theology school, in church Providence, I was afforded by being the first minority in charge of a high school in New York and one of the few throughout the whole city if there was any others. And they chose me to be a goodwill ambassador to Puerto Rico. That was the opening of an experience out of the more or less, and I say slightly, ghetto situation, without trying to be really negative about it, but that's the way I can describe it. To see another part of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
I went there as a goodwill ambassador, and I came back. On that trip was only one other minority person. And at that time, the people who got tripped together said they knew I was going to go to the inaugural ball of the governors. So they hired a bright Negro student to go along so I have somebody to dance with. That's where integration and segregation was still up in the north. But on that trip, I met some of the greatest students from across New York and people whose parents certainly didn't have backgrounds like mine, some were doctors and lawyers and all that kind of stuff. So my exposure to the world really opened up tremendously to that experience that didn't last but maybe 2 weeks. But I saw people in the world. When I went to Governor's Ball, and I thought about that. I'm at the governor of Puerto Rico's inaugurational ball. An African-American kid from the South Bronx, from an area. And I'm dancing. I'm meeting him personally. I'm talking to Jose Greco, one of the best flamenco dancers in the world. And I'm saying, this stuff started hitting me. And started telling me that my reach is greater than I think it is. What I could do is greater than coming out of the South Bronx as all of my life. But a rich experience in the South Bronx that let me appreciate where I came from and where I was going. And the maneuvers between gangs that were probably trying to beat me up and stab me and shoot me, I learned negotiation skills to the rough streets of New York that now I can apply in colleges and universities and business. I mean, it really is how God does this thing. I call it in a sermon that I preach. I call it now, here's a couple people preaching in my church, use the same thing. I call it the left hand of God. While you're watching God do everything with his right hand, that's the way you think your life is. You don't know what he's moving with his left hand that you can't see. So you think this might be the end. He's opened up a new beginning. You think the door over here is shut, but he's putting another doorway someplace else. And I learned that all coming out of the Bronx. I know why I didn't mention it. I guess because it's just too much sometimes my background, 82. But that was a tremendous experience. And then when I took the kids, that's one reason motivated me to take the kids from Riverhead to Africa. I told the kids that we're going to go I was flying to Nassau. I never had many vacations, but I was getting a chance to go to a conference I'm speaking at in Nassau. And all the people thought, I can't say all, but all the young people definitely thought I was talking about what's the big deal about going to Nassau County.
Yeah.
They never equated that I had an invitation to a big conference in Nassau, Bahamas. And I never equated. I thought they were going to think about Nassau as being why I thought it was a big honor for me being up there in Long Island. So we both were miles apart, both in our clouds of understanding. But it really hit me that later on, a company interviewed me for a job as a consultant, Context 7, I never forget it, in New York. And the interviewers who did it for the company went to the company's president and all and said, you shouldn't be interviewing him to work for you. He should be interviewed to be a board member of your corporation. His worldview, I can't believe he's from South Bronx, is so big. He's been through Africa. He's been through Europe. As a boy from South Bronx doing these things, they said, we all thought he was just a good consultant knowing business from the South Bronx, living in Newton, Massachusetts for a while now, Brooklyn. This man, because I never thought about telling him that, ask him. When we start talking to him, he'd been through Europe. He'd been to 5-6 countries in Africa. He said, and I found out by asking him, how did you get your worldview being raised in the Bronx? And I said, from traveling, going to school, so he asked me where I traveled. I never thought of it. So when I came to Riverhead, I thought about the students in my church that didn't have a worldview. And that's how I said we had Africa 93, it was called. We took them there in 93. Because I wanted them to get a worldview. Took them to college and universities, Pennsylvania, New York, different places. Suffolk County is a great school. My wife is chairman of the board there, so I can't talk about it. And I wouldn't. It's a good school, I know the president. But that's not the only school.
Just to think outside.
Right.
Yeah.
And a couple of them that were going to, a couple of them from the regular Riverhead school, I guess, was going to schools in Massachusetts. I said, how do I get them ready for the Simmonsons that I taught at, the Bentleys I taught at, the Harvards that I attended, University of Mass I attended? How do I get them to see that when they graduate from Riverhead High School and go out, they're going to be people of different races, different creeds, different religions? How do I prepare people in this little bubble here to open up their eyes so that they don't get lost, or at least not shocked that their roommate might be from Taiwan and stuff like that.
Yes. But for you, you mentioned coming out of high school, but did you went to Pennsylvania for?
Yes, Lincoln University is located in Pennsylvania.
But did you really know what you wanted to do coming out of high school, or you were not really sure at that time?
Well, you asking these questions are really taking me back. And that's good. You're an excellent interviewer. I was one of 5 black students in my high school in the Bronx that had college prep or academic. They call it academic diploma.
Oh, okay.
The whole senior class and all. I was prepping and thinking that I wanted to go to school in New York because I wanted to become a doctor. Why did I want to become a doctor is based on the only 2 people in my community, there's only one of each too, that were minorities that I thought was making money and helping people were the doctors and the lawyer.
Yes.
The minister was a good person, but I know he was poor because I was paying him with the church money we were giving. So, so those are my outlooks. Mm-hmm. And I went down and I looked at city schools and all. And someone said, have you ever thought about going to an historical black college? One of the social workers helped my brother get to Bluefield State. At that time, it was not a historical black college, but it was a black college in Virginia, West Virginia. Mm-hmm. Mixed school. Now they tell me it's almost all white, but it was a mixed school. And he went there and she told him. And I thought about it and looked up some schools. And I thought about something that wasn't that far away from the Bronx. Because my brothers went in West Virginia, they couldn't get home for holidays. Mm-hmm. And my father had this thing, look, I'm a Statterwine, I'm a laborer, a day laborer. I don't get paid if I don't go to work. I get sick, I just get sick and don't work. Or I work sick. Yes. And so when I looked there and I found the 3 schools I wanted to go that might be historical black school, one was in D.C., Howard University, the famous one. Mm-hmm. Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, and Morehouse College in Atlanta, where Dr. King graduated from. When I thought about Atlanta, and I've been that way, I said, I'm not going to be able to get home. My father ain't going to be able to afford to get me home for holidays. And he always said, well, I get you home for one holiday during the school year. So I said, that's too far. Uh-huh. Lincoln was in competition at that time. It was an all-male school with Morehouse. And they both had these reputations. Lincoln had a reputation for the most amount of minority doctors in the United States came out of Lincoln. The second most amount of lawyers came out of Lincoln as undergraduate school. And doctors, I said, ooh, I'll go there. Uh-huh. And so I went to college really with my major being biology and general science. I graduated degree in that. And that's how I probably ended up in J&J. And before J&J, I applied to Einstein School of Medicine. Okay. And I spoke to the dean up there. That was in the Bronx, just opening up. I thought it was a good way to keep close to the Bronx.
Yeshiva?
Yeah.
Yeshiva.
Up that way.
Yeah.
And he said, we can give you a scholarship, but I'd rather you wait here and make sure you want to be a doctor. Because sometimes we have dreams of things, but that's not what, in the end, we really want to do. And I'm not trying to discourage you. What I'm trying to say is that we get a scholarship. We expect you to stay here 3 years.
Yeah.
Because you drop out those schools, there's a place missing now. So I said, that's great. So I just worked a year. I found that he was right.
Mm-hmm.
That I felt more suited doing things like in business, teaching, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
More not teaching, really, more business, stuff like that. And so I did change my direction then and went on from there.
And when did you graduate from Lincoln?
1965.
1965. So
all the civil rights marches and stuff were going, yeah.
While you were at college there. What was that like going? Could you touch on the civil rights and your time in college there?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that interests me by going to a predominantly black college, I always say that because I think I had one or two in my whole class of 65 white students. Because local students sometimes couldn't afford, so Lincoln's right down the road. They go to Lincoln. So you get some of the local people. I really thought about what they taught me and what they gave me. I had never been in an all blacks, basically, situation. Professors were mixed, clearly. But the history of Lincoln University was, it was really stocked with professors from Princeton. See, once you learn the history, you know why they taught things that a lot of black schools didn't teach, because they were Princeton teachers who took the train down there and taught at a black college. I started learning things. I started meeting people. I started knowing things. And my world of curiosity, thinking that when you're from New York, you went to the best schools, and find out that the kid from Fort Worth, Texas, who graduated down there, was the number one in your class the whole time you were there. And that someone from Mississippi, they were in another school. He said, well, all these people come from all these schools, and they always talk about the North and this. And I had a guy ahead of me by a year from the Bronx who went to High School of Science. Bronx High School of Science was the school, and he wasn't ahead of the class. I'm saying, man, this is a whole new world. People sometimes tell you things that you start falling in with falsities that are not true, because that's your environment. That's what you think is true. And meeting these people from all around the world, meeting people that Lincoln had an African center. So, and that's where the African leaders, first presidents of African countries, graduated from Lincoln and went to that. So I'm up there saying, I'm learning all this stuff. I'm learning about African art. I'm trying to think of the artists. One of the world famous artists from Pennsylvania lived in Mushroom Country near Pennsylvania. Andrew Wyeth.
Oh, yes.
And his collection was at Lincoln University.
Oh.
And I'm looking reading that. And he comes here and lecture on art once a year in the second semester of every year. And I read about this guy. And I said, this guy is famous all over the world. And I'm in a minority school and he's teaching. And his paintings are hanging around. And then I realized when I found out he was born in that area, he painted that area in Pennsylvania. And I'm starting to understand why he kind of felt he was giving back and being part of it. And so that whole world opened up to me. At the same time, the marches was going on. Yeah. I was in the choir, and the choir was traveling around the South. A&T was where Jesse Jackson was president of a student body. And the head of fraternity I finally joined. He was the head of that fraternity. He was like 2 years ahead in schooling. My best friend in college was 2 years ahead, Dr. Reverend Calvin Morris, who became his assistant and the first head of the Martin Luther King Center in Atlanta. All of us come out these schools. And that's one of the things I truly cherish. I'm meeting people all over the world, but also I'm meeting outstanding black students. A member of my class of 65, Reginald, went to Harvard, became the first head of the Harvard Law Society, or Black Law Society, something like that. And then he got Commerce Department in D.C. And they put his big picture up on the wall. You go there like he's hanging there. His room was right next to mine. We all went through the same thing together. And you just start seeing I got this whole different view of blacks. I really did.
Mm-hmm.
Not that, because I was only one of five. Now I think the world is just you and that other four. But and what they were doing, the Solicitor General of the United States, graduated from Lincoln University, and I'm seeing all these folks. My world's just expanding crazy. And one time in the UN, I think out of all the African countries, all but one African leader graduated from Lincoln. So, Nigeria and all that. I'm just getting fascinated about the history. And the marches are going on. And I'm saying, don't they know that some of the people that lead this country, Solicitor General, they're black folk, but they went to some black colleges and they came from the South, a lot from Maryland. Mm-hmm. That was close to Lincoln, Delaware, the surrounding areas like Delaware, Philadelphia. Yeah. And I'm saying, they know that. And so we started getting involved in the marches as we traveled to the South as a choir. And we got aware of that. And so we started joining different things. My kid sister up in New York went to Columbia school, and she was my wife's best friend. That's why I say kid sister, really close. We all came out of church, and they all were Hunter High School students going from the junior high school level. So they went through the whole process there in the high school. So we said 3 of them were from, out of the whole Hunter system, was from our church in the Bronx. Mm-hmm. So we started seeing, and our pastor was really super bright, from Union Theological Seminary, ended up teaching at Princeton and we retired. So we're watching all this stuff happening, marching. So we all started getting involved in the marches in different places. The whole community fighting for civil rights. And we have to educate. Every church I've been in, we educated minorities to know more about history, about blacks, and about the country. Right now, the Family Community Life Center, I'm trying to think of next year of what could be the best thing to teach minorities in the Riverhead surrounding areas. And I came to working in jail. I worked in jail for 25 years. I just left jail this year and got my place. We run the jail ministry for the Protestants in Suffolk County.
Okay, for Suffolk County Sheriffs?
Yes, yeah. So for the jail system, and I'm a chaplain there. Yes. Now, not only chaplain, I'm a lieutenant on regular sheriff. So anyway, I watched what they learned. I watched what they learned. One time I preached a sermon in church. All of us are locked up, but all of us are not in jail. Mm. And I got it from teaching people in jail. And literally, I got people that came out of jail that our church made a commitment that we lift those people up, we pray for them. If they come out of jail, a couple of them came out of jail and they were pregnant and these stuff, we brought them to our church, we brought them stuff, we gave them stuff, we got all of them set up to move on. The baby was born, they called us. When they got adopted, I was visiting jail. Adopted parents is on the legislature of Suffolk County. I never knew that until he told me. I said, you wanted to adopt my son. I said, well, they said you couldn't find anybody to adopt him. I was a little older, but I was going to adopt him. I really want to give him a chance. And he said, we love that boy. I said, and you deserve him. I was just seeing that no one was coming forward. I was not going to let him be lost out in this world. Those are things that I think we need to teach. Yes. We teach some of the things. Our church has always taught Black history on the side. But I think with what's going on in the country today, we need to do more of how it operates with our government. Mm-hmm. See, because I give out constitutions while I was in jail. I bought them, and I just give them to prisoners. Read it. You ain't not doing nothing. They used to laugh. Yeah. I said, what are you doing up there besides playing ping pong once in a while, waiting your turn? Read this book. So I talked about reading about the Constitution. And I said, we ought to offer a really strong course at our Family Community Life Center on the Constitution. Now that I'm learning, because I didn't realize how much the president could break with power and stuff, And all the road guards I thought were permanent road guards. Not permanent to me at 82 no more, and just learn what's going on. I said, we have to prepare a generation who has already started on their way, but learning from what we did not know and what we thought, and why you have to read and think about things in a more critical way. Because I didn't know some of those laws that Trump broke were possibly easy to break. I didn't realize a lot of things was done customarily.
Yes.
With the Constitution. I didn't know that. And I'm learning in my 80s. I said, we need to get a course, open up the whole community, surrounding community, invite people to come and teach them, get a book and teach them and share with them. We know enough professors. I said, I know enough professors in Long Island. Wife, you're chairperson of Suffolk Community College, the presidents and stuff. We've been working this a long time. We need to get them people in here. We go up to the medical school in Delphi once a year to teach their medical students, my wife and I, on the experience that happened to us in Riverhead Hospital, the hospital, Central Suffolk, and where I had COVID.
Okay.
I had served 8 years on the board, and they treated me like I was nothing and stuff. They couldn't even recognize my name. And I was, of course, out of it. I was there for 40 days and nights. And a psychiatrist came in to investigate me. And I told the psychiatrist, they finally got me a room. I think I was in the hallway. I don't know, I was isolated, but now that I'm starting to get back on my feet and understand who I am, I heard there's some people that go home with COVID because they have no newspapers in the room. I'm isolated. The people coming all wrapped up in these garments, 'cause that's what was all new. When it first broke out, I was at the hospital. I said, only thing they have on is television. I said, that wearies me after a while. And when he came and talked to me, I said, you should understand, because I'm like you. I used to be a college professor. He thought I was crazy. Now, I'm telling you how bad this was. Yeah. I said, I have a library that Riverhead Library tell me, my personal library, they had students that worked on their masters from Stony Brook using my personal library. That's how big it was. I said, I have over 3,000 of my books. Wow. I taught all these years. I've been in theology all these years. I've been in the book field, you might call it, And I usually sell my book like some students there. I don't know why I thought I was going to use them 10 years later or 20. But I kept them. And I had shelves built up in the whole house, a number of books they have in the whole library. People wrote their masters and stuff. And I said, we got to figure out, tomorrow, how to use what we know. So they sent them to take me into Philadelphia. I speak to the medical school class. This year, they thought, which I thought a long time ago, is more productive than grab me all these early mornings to get in this limousine, even though you drive me. I'm going to have to wait because I'm teaching, we're sharing with the first class med school day. That means they're like 8 something. That means I'm getting up 4 o'clock and all that. The ride might be nice, but I'm sleeping. I can't make it. What they finally did a movie of us. They came to our church this past summer and did a movie. We don't have to go there to show the movie to the students, which I thought was a cheaper way of doing it anyhow. Yeah. So that was fine with me. And I said, they know us. How do we pull those connections into the church and show people? I work at Stony Brook all the time, doing volunteer work on their boards and stuff. I said, you at Suffolk community, we've been out. We ought to be grabbing the people. I said, when I first came here, I used to bring people from Ivy League schools to interview my students for Ivy League schools and other schools. I had other schools too, but they never thought about coming to Riverhead and interview students for Harvard or Radcliffe or any of those schools. I had them come.
Yes.
And I set up a program. They come and interview them and got something interested. Some of them might not have went, but they got interested in college. And I got them in the black college system. I got them in the University of Penn, all kinds of schools. I said, we're educators, we're ministers, and you're my wife and stuff. We're still not passing on enough. We work hard enough so we think it's enough, but it's not enough. And so when I was telling retirement what I really wanted to do with the family community lifestyle, I said, I don't know how long God's going to give me to work, but I said, let's think about what we know and what we could share that we haven't been able to share in the church, or at least develop. And I'm willing to work on it while I'm retired. So the church gave me an office downstairs with the family community lifestyle. So I'll still be in church building up at a low level.
Okay.
And I think that's exciting for me.
Yes.
And I don't feel, people say, I know you must be like going awful because you leave. I said, no, God has opened a whole new path. And my investment counselor said, now let me get this straight, Reverend. I've been trying to get you retired for about 8 years now. Mm-hmm. And now you call me up and saying you're retiring. And I said, what you doing? And now you're going to become a construction manager building a center for people. He said, that's not retiring. I said, oh, I've been retiring from church, not from life.
Yes.
And I told him that because my doctor told me, only thing I worry about you, Pastor Coverdale, is that my brother is a minister in the Indian faith, Indian tradition. And I watch you talk to you, like your members come here, a lot of them, and they tell me about your service, your creativity. I'm always afraid, that's why I tell you don't retire, because I don't want to see you collapse. He says sometimes people who are doing really advanced stuff and people put them out the pasture,
mm-hmm. Yeah,
they collapse. Mm-hmm. They don't know what to do. They're not in the mix anymore. And so I said, oh, that's nice. He said, but one thing I found about you, that since you were 80, I always ask people, how's the sermons going? They talk about your creativity, and you're still building. You're still doing, you do stuff that they never expect. You preach a sermon and stop, and a young person runs up to the mic and stands behind the pulpit and start telling the traumatic thing they've been through that relates to the sermon, and then go back down and you continue with the sermon. Nobody would think about stuff like that. And so it really struck me when I told him that I'm retiring. He really encouraged me not to sit down and go to sleep.
No.
But I said, yeah, I know I can't work as full as I did last time, but I said, if I get up and get myself going, I teased him. I said, take these pills you gave me and have my cup of coffee and my slice of toast or cheese, whatever I'm going to have. And I'm out in my office every morning by 9 o'clock at my house. I could use the phone to get to people I need to get to. Then I go to church for people I need to meet and do other kind of things with and work with and stuff. So
yes.
I'm not stopping yet.
No.
So that's what we're doing.
Yes. And then you also mentioned teaching. You taught at several different colleges, right. Whether business, and then you were at Harvard Divinity School. Right. You touched on that a bit, but could you tell us a little bit more how that was going to teaching at an Ivy League school? Yeah,
but that was a small part. I'm going to tell you, they called me in. They had a course developed for rabbis, pastors, priests. I don't think there are any nuns in the class. No.
Oh, okay.
And the idea was you were supposed to take your knowledge of business because they found out how to save the church in Providence.
Yes.
Show them how to apply some business techniques to churches they involve in, or parishes or temples that could benefit from business, and maybe they can ask you what course they might take if they feel you all course or what books might be helpful. And I had a big book list, so for each person, whatever they were lacking, I would put a check next to that's a better book for you to read. Don't read my whole book list, but those are some that can help you do some things. And I did that, and then Harvard gave me an office in what they call the Stacks. That's their library with all the research people.
Yes.
I have a place in Stacks. And then I started going to school there. So it wasn't no more than maybe a year or so working with the priests and
okay.
But that was probably the way they slid me also into school, and I got scholars and stuff to help do some things. So that was a different thing. I knew the dean of school. In fact, when I was ordained, some of the most famous people from the Harvard Divinity School came to my ordination. Harvey Cox was my advisor. Stendhal, who ran Harvard School from Sweden, and is bishop down there. He came. I had people that, and this is a common neighborhood, so they look like, who's these folk coming to be a part? But they knew I was one of them, and I worked on committees with them. And I told them when I was being ordained, and I didn't expect them necessarily to come. I'm just letting them know what I'm doing as a student. They came and showed out. And, they did some filming of it, some students from Simmons who didn't know how to do a lot of great filming, but they did at least some filming of it. And we kept the reels around till they got faded. It was, they could no longer really see the pitch as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that was about 2 years ago we finally got rid of those. But I think that's what the guy was saying. Interview was talking about. He should be on the board. I had a way of reaching out to people. Preston Williams, he's still at Harvard. He was actually one of the ones I had to work close with, and he was only minority there when I was there as a teacher, full-time teacher, when he had tenure there. And when they did a special presentation, I scraped together my $1,000 as best I could and sent it to support what they were doing to recognize them for a lifetime work and all. They knew me. Uh-huh. And when they wanted to teach people who were at the Kennedy School, Harvard hired me for about 5 years, teach there every summer, the summer program for ministers through the Kennedy School. So that put me down from the Divinity School to the Kennedy School. Uh-huh. And so I taught at the Kennedy School, and people I taught became Sacramento, California, became the mayor of Sacramento, California. They all went on things in Detroit and stuff. And I got all these lists that people at the church look at, people who they were in my class for a summer, mm-hmm. to the summer session, but who called me. I came and preach for them or do different things and did some things with federal government with, how to put together teams and stuff. So I had a really extensive kind of always use my education and background. And I worked for National Training Laboratories, NTL in Washington. I got inducted into there, and I taught there for years, every summer in Bethel, Maine. Mm-hmm. And on the way here, the gentleman there, I got a call in the car. And it was the woman I told F she hung up because she was going to call me up tomorrow. I told her I was on my way here. And she said, here, because I had a speaker, she said, it was just kind of funny. When she was finished, I hung up. I said, the first course she ever took in National Training Laboratory was taught by me. That woman ended up being my boss. He started laughing. I said, she went through the whole program more than I did, because I was really teaching the college outside. And she ended up becoming my boss. And I said, now I have known her at least 43 years, because she knew me before I came to this church. Oh, and the whole time I've been here. I can't tell you how many years, but I know I can use count it by how many years I've been in church. Yeah. I sent people and got them scholarships from Brookhaven Lab, as well as the lady that's going to take over the pastor. I sent them all through the national training program, because as a teacher there, I get to send a student free.
Okay.
Or help them get there. My brother owned a house, bed and breakfast up that way after a while. So I gave him a cheaper place to stay. And I wrote to Brookhaven Lab and told him how this program is so worthwhile that I can get the young lady who's now my choir director, Rosa Palmer, still living. And if you guys would support her with a meal plan and a transportation background, I could get a full scholarship and your company would benefit by it. And they did. She went away, they paid all the expenses, and I got her free scholarship to all the courses.
Wow.
And so she left. Small world.
Yes. But you mentioned Providence, Rhode Island, and helping out there, but you said you never really thought of becoming a pastor. But you were teaching, you were in the business area and working in that, but you ended up gravitating towards becoming a pastor.
Yes. I just finished doing the trek with, I told you, the religious leaders teach them business. And I was teaching at Simmons College. And there was a need that came out that church was a historic church and needed some help.
Yes.
And one of the professors or one of the people on doctoral students, somebody, I can't remember exactly, there's so many of them around, recommend to them that maybe invite this college teacher down who's also in the field of religion on the side, because that's a church. And he could probably put those two things to get your church back on its feet. Mm-hmm. They were losing financially, going kind of bankrupt and all that kind of stuff. So I went down there, I worked with them, and I really had a good time. And then one Sunday they said, "Can you give us a message? After all, you're in theology, you gotta know something. You might not have been there long, but you've been there long enough to know something." I said, "Okay," because they needed somebody to preach that Sunday. I did. After I preached Sunday, 2 or 3 weeks ago, "We need somebody here. Will you preach again?" I said, "Okay." Took my wife down there, the daughter, went down there and I preached again. And then the deacon came to me and says, "We put your name in. We want you to become the pastor of this church." I said, "Pastor, I'm just doing this on the side to help you guys." And he said, "No, I really believe God put a calling on your life. And all of us that heard you in this historic church and how you helped us and brought us out there can see what maybe God will do with you down here and getting this church fully to blossom again, historically." And I told my wife, and they said, "You don't have to be here full time," because I lived in Newton, Massachusetts. But if you can come down maybe once or twice a week and on Sunday. That's maybe Sunday, maybe once a week or twice a week. On a part-time basis. We appreciate it. And I did that. Next thing you know, I was a full-time pastor. Next thing, I'm still teaching, but now my calendar's getting crowded doing pastoring down there. Next thing I know, I'm really putting time down there. And I said, "God, if this is the way you're directing my life, stop me. I will dedicate this time for them." Yeah. So after I finished teaching, and they were going to renew my contract, I said, "I'm going into ministry full time."
Okay.
And that was the decision. And so I really went full time down at Providence in Bond Street Baptist Church. So my first church. And I stayed there 8.5, 9 years. Then I came
to Riverhead. And you mentioned coming to Riverhead and it being different, and it's obviously changed even since 1982.
Right.
And you talked about the community at the church, and it was a different environment from working more in the cities. But right. What do you think you've enjoyed most about working in the Riverhead community and the people at the church?
Wow, good question. I think I got an answer for you though, because it's attached to something else.
Yes.
I think, let me phrase this way. Over the last few months, it might be 3 months, knowing that I'm going to retirement, I began to become circumspect about my journey here in Riverhead. The reason why I had to stop and slow down is because I kept doing things and losing track of my accomplishments that people at the church would tell me that I did. And I couldn't remember. Because if I accomplished that goal's out of my mind. I'm on the next goal. And I wasn't. And my older brother said, you should be more of a historian and really kept track. He said, because I watched it. He sat down one time, I was in his house. He told me all the stuff that I did that I knew I did them, but I really didn't remember that I did them until he said I did them. And so what I thought came out of the experience is that I thought I built community with people who thought they would never be in community, particularly with me, or saw how I would fit in, or predicted. They said, remember that church predicted I wouldn't last more than a year or two. And when they kept saying each year, he's still here.
Yeah.
And people left and died, he's still here. And I kept moving them forward. What I saw was God showed me a way to take the gifts that I felt would not match or be suited, because he saw where Suffolk County Riverhead was going, and I didn't. I only saw where they were. Mm-hmm. And he was trying to get me to be part of moving that train of people, you might say, of illustration, towards where Riverhead is going to be one day that I have no idea yet, but start moving that direction. And so I took all the skills I had, like I said, training programs. I brought training programs. I brought all the skills I had, I presented. And I could see the whole body of church change, and I preached differently. I preached on the whole thing, saved to serve as our model for my last year. Okay. I preached for them to understand that God selected them, no matter what skills they had, no matter what their history was, no matter what their former training was, because God was not through with them. And God was going to make them exceptional and preparing them to do things. And I saw people respond to that during my tenure here, over 40 years. They went away to school. They became, head nurses, and supervisors in medical school, and scientists. And I just saw them. They come back and talk to me, and they were just going on. I just kept preaching. Another generation moves on. I kept on preaching the one that was left. I wasn't afraid to go into places that a lot of people would not go. In Providence, I got my first deacon board by going down in a Masonic hall in the basement where they had a bar.
Okay.
And I saw who was being really social around the bar, who was talking. I started talking to them. They said, aren't you the pastor? What you doing down here? I said, I'm looking for some deacons. Some people that can be trained to work at church. I got about 3 or 4 deacons out of the bar. I came here and people in different places I attend, and they would think, Baptists had this thing about they didn't drink hard liquor or stuff like that. That was sort of the history of the Baptist movement.
Okay,
yes. But I'll tell you very truthfully, that might be more the history of what they wrote, but not what they did. And I come out of the Presbyterian tradition. See, none of that was taboo. Well, in the Baptist church, some of them men said they don't do that here. But I just, kept doing my path and looking for people who had the ability to draw people to them. Now my job was to teach them what to draw. Mm-hmm. And I took it from the Bible, the gospel, where Jesus walked up to Peter and said, come follow me. I will help you to become fishers of men. Not that you fishers of men now, you fish of men, but I will help you to become. And I took that become. My job is to help God in his work to help others become. He knows what he wants them to ultimately be. I'm just there to help them become, give them some added stuff that he wants me to give them. So my function in the church after all these years was that I helped this community become a community. I helped this community for the first time get a town board to vote for a building project that they were invested in and could not see, but stuck with faith and voted that they were going to be a church that was going to look outward, not just inward, and voted to give me space to come back with what they might have thought was sound a little impractical, but then a lot of things he saw was impractical came to be. So let's give him a little more rope. And then when they saw the stuff happening, it was just this last one I thought they're about ready to couldn't kill me, maybe. Now, when is this going to happen? I'm getting ready to leave. The Andy's not here. And it all happens. And then we start bringing millions of dollars in for the project stuff. Stuff starts happening. Suffolk County Supervisor Ed Remain, County Executive, recommended us to the state as one of the only worthwhile project he saw out of Suffolk County they should fund. That's how we got that $1 million. We got voted the most significant program and project in Suffolk County maybe 3 or 4 years before that. The most significant. That's been recorded in newspapers and everything. And so we kept building stuff and kept going back with those little things with people to tell them that we are making progress. I know it ain't there. But hold on, we are doing. So I thought, and I would say to you that the best thing I thought came is helping develop a community and individuals in the community, even to the point that the next pastor of the church grew up in the community, family historically is from the community, and also the first woman pastor of that Baptist church.
Yeah.
Now, see, and so there's a great deal of pride. She saw windows for Pella and all this stuff. She never was in school and stuff. And she's bright as whiz and went to these schools and did well and all the rest. And the sad part was, though her husband knew it, he died 2 weeks ago. And last week, the past Tuesday, we buried him. But he knew she was pastor of the church coming in December. And I was with him the whole time. He had this rare disease illness. He was sick for like 34 years. And he just wanted to see his kids grow up and go to high school, come out. And I said, look at you. When he was near dying, just about a year or so before I said, and they told him how sick he was and that he would have to go to the nursing home and he didn't want to. I said, wait a minute, Michael. I said, we asked God and prayed because you wanted to see your kids graduate from high school. Your son is 40 and you got a grandson. Your daughter is working now and she's been out of school for 4 or 5 years, graduated from college. I said, I'm not in your position, but if you want to really look at it, did God give you and I more than what we asked for? He was at peace from then on. He was a little crying tears, but he said, God has really blessed me. He has answered all my prayers. I said, the problem with us humans, we always want more. But sometimes we don't stop and thank God for what he has given us. I always thought a little differently because I always thought I'd be dead by 18, if not younger, from being in the South Bronx or shootings and stuff. So I celebrated my 18th birthday. In that area, people always cussed all the time. And I did a bad word and my older brother said, cussing is the tool of the ignorant. They cuss because they don't have a vocabulary word to express. I was only 18 years old, getting ready to go to college. When I went to college, I didn't curse. And people knew in college, they always talk about me. Oh, Coverdale, the one that never cursed. I know. And I told him, I was sharing with him. I said, this is my older brother said, we must find or stretch our vocabulary to find and use a word that expresses what that cuss word was. And I said, and cuss words had a place for like urgent things that really happened. Something really crazy happened. Yeah. You might use one word. I said, now everybody uses like that's the vocabulary of the day.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
So that's what I believe is going to be. I'm leaving someone there I supported them all the way, and I raised a whole community of officers in the church and people around them. And I worked, like I said, with those in prison. Mm-hmm. We really take time to pray for all prisoners, work with them. We didn't just talk the stuff, we walked the walk. We have a prison mission operation, 2 ministers, 3 actually still going and pray, take care of people. I accepted the call to be a sheriff, a lieutenant chaplain on the police department, a sheriff's department, Suffolk County Police, sheriff department. And went all the different occasions until about a year or so ago when my eyes began to fail a little bit. I loved and embraced Suffolk County with all I had to offer and plan to offer some more if I can.
Yes. But it seems like you mentioned with the family, the housing and the community,
Right.
Family Community Life Center, that it seems like it all just came together after 40 years.
Yeah.
And
the building part just came together. We had
the building part. The idea was there.
Yeah, the idea, the vision was there. And now it's our developer is hoping to get things through the town for the different plans they got to put in all, and maybe break ground this coming spring or so, next year.
And I think just I had one other question, just because we've reflected on your time here, even in Riverhead, but obviously the community has changed and the North Fork has changed. But what are your hopes for the future of the church and the wider North Fork community?
I think we broke a barrier by finally getting a town board that's all white, and many people feel it was segregated and did not treat people in Riverhead, black people, fairly in terms of police department jobs and all those kind of local jobs. But starting to see what people can do if you unleash them. I was in chains by them, but not by me. Because what they feared, not what they knew, or what they fully considered, still work out the old stereotypes of fear. I mentioned supervisor ain't gonna let nobody have more people hired in the center. Never thought about the benefit of the center. Just that we might have more janitors or people apply for jobs. I didn't quite get that, but it was important to him. Yes. I had to learn where he was coming from. People who thought that this would never happen. Many, many, many blacks and many whites said, "You have done the impossible." So they could sing the song, "The Impossible Dream." Because they said, "I've never seen somebody stick to something that long." And I talked to them about perseverance. I have a college fraternity I belong to, I still belong to today. And one of their principles is perseverance. Every time I look at the emblem, I said, persevere. Hang in there, persevere. God's not through with you yet. I hope I have put that into the community as a whole, into the embodiment of the community. Mm-hmm. That you can have dreams. That we can do some things that seem impossible to some, but not impossible to you. And even if they're impossible for you, if it's a dream that you have, then try to see where that dream can take and what it can do. I think I put a whole sense of education in certain people, the value of it. Though I'm not taking credit for that all, because I get it from too many places, but I think they got it they came to church, they know I wasn't going to let them. I always had a superintendent of school at Riverhead visit our church personally and have a tea reception downstairs after church or something so they could meet the members of church. Because I found out the kids act better when they think and know that you know the superintendent of school.
Yes.
I was wise that a long time ago. So they all were there. They came.
Yes.
All of them came. So they all got a chance to stand before the church to say something. I was never afraid to have politicians, whether they were Republican or Democrats. If they wanted to visit church and say something, give them 5 minutes to say something.
Yes.
Because I think whoever won, church needed to know something about them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was really a kind of a different thing I was inculcating into the people I thought that God had given me talents to put into them. And now I got others that's continue to put it in.
Yes.
Reverend Lincoln's not going to stop. She got it. She's going to put that stuff into them. So it's not whether I live or die that something's going to stop. You teach the generation to do the work, you know, that they teach the next generation what's the importance about it. We used to laugh. My mother would cook, and we want the recipe, and she had these rolls she made that were pretty good. And we kept saying, Mama, you've been in church all your life. You know God's going to call you home one day. Please don't take the recipe to heaven.
Yes.
You have no use there. We still need the use. And when they wanted the grandkids to grab the whole of the recipe and started watching and making it, we got it and stuff. And that's what I feel.
Yeah.
I feel that whenever I depart, I've left something behind. None of us know how long it's going to last, it's going to stay. Mm-hmm. But I'm sure that Noah, when he built the ark, never realized we'd still be talking about him building something without any plans or directions and thinking God was crazy because he never saw rain. Mm-hmm. The story is still told about him. Maybe one day, some youth that I've touched that might be a grandparent might say, I wish you would have known Pastor Coverdale, and say something about my life that might help that next life move on. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but I think that's the value. And I still get teared up about that because if you have buried as many people over the years that I have buried, and witnessed birth of people that now are adults and they giving birth, you understand that you ain't here forever. The Bible shows you that the greatest are not here. You watch presidents live, pass on. You watch funeral services on TV of great people, even queens and kings. Mm-hmm. You're fully aware that you are not here forever. And that you're just kind of crazy and don't think about it. Mm-hmm. So the answer is, do all you can while you are here. And do it in a sense that no one else might appreciate what you're doing. Your job is not to get them to appreciate everything you do, but you find value yourself in everything you do and hope one day maybe they might appreciate it. That's my story.
Yes.
That's it. I never thought I'd ever be down here. When they told me you wanted me to come down and do this, I just couldn't even imagine what you wanted to hear from me.
Yes.
But I'm glad we did this because you got me thinking about things I've hidden in the closet of my life journey. Then maybe I ought to pull out and look at it again. Yes. I can even be more reflective of not only the good stuff where I messed up. And in our faith, you can't go back and clean up your mess. We believe that Jesus came to clean up our mess so we can move on. And it struck me this morning because I poured a cup of coffee more than I should have back into the carafe because I made it too high for the milk and spilled it all over the counter. And my wife had the kitchen done over not that long ago. And, when you get something done over still new, you're trying to, and I'm up there wiping with sponges. I'm taking paper towels, to make sure, looking under the mat to make sure. And when she came out, I had to confess. I said, before you go in the kitchen, I want you to know I spilled some coffee. I really tried to clean it up as much as I could. And it struck me, she had to go in behind me no matter how much I tried to do better. There was still coffee spilled on the floor. I didn't see or something. And she cleaned up my mess. And it made me think religiously. All of us, if you believe in God, whatever creed or belief you have, or if you don't, the point is that we all make messes. But in our faith tradition, we had somebody that came to earth to clean up our mess, only so that we can move on and prayerfully not create another mess. Mm-hmm. So the weight of our stupidity and wrongdoing is lifted enough because God knew we couldn't carry it all our life and be free to do anything for Him if He didn't get some of it off our backs. Mm-hmm. So I'm appreciative. That's why that young gentleman, I have him singing Sunday. I am so glad to be standing here today. Because I know it was by the grace and mercy of God that I am. But it didn't have to necessarily be so.
Yes. No, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on today and share your story and your career and all the work you've done and continue to do for the church and the community out here. So it was a real pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 217 with Pastor Charles A. Coverdale. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.